If you still think the FCC's power over broadcast television is just a regulatory formality, watch what happens when a chairman decides to use it as a weapon against a comedian who made one joke the president didn't like. Jimmy Kimmel walked back onto his stage on September 23, 2025, and said 7 words that ended the conversation Trump had been trying to win for 6 days. Not a monologue, not a rant, not a prepared response that had been lawyered and softened and trimmed into something safe. 7 words, delivered at the exact moment a clip of Trump on Air Force One, mocking Kimmel's ratings, savoring his suspension, performing the confidence of a man who believed the silence he purchased was permanent, finished playing on the screen behind the desk. Kimmel waited for the clip to end. He looked at the camera. He said, "Well, I do tonight." The audience erupted. Trump posted within the hour. The clip cleared 3 million views before midnight. And the thing that Trump feared most, not the joke, not the comedian, but the demonstration in front of millions of people that the silence he engineered had not only failed, but had made the return louder than any ordinary broadcast could have been, was already moving through every platform that the FCC does not control and cannot reach. By morning, the architecture of what had happened was fully visible, and it was not what the administration had built it to look like. 6 days earlier, September 17th, Charlie Kirk, the conservative activist, is dead. The country is in the specific kind of grief that arrives when a polarizing figure dies violently, when no emotion is permitted to exist without being immediately political. Jimmy Kimmel, taping his show that evening, makes a comment. He notes that Kirk's suspected killer had been photographed at a Trump rally. He calls Kirk's death a tragedy. He says something about the movement Kirk helped build and the violence it has generated that is pointed and timed in the way that only Kimmel can make something pointed and timed, devastating without being cruel, specific without being dismissive. By 11:00 p.m., FCC Chairman Brendan Carr is on a conservative podcast. He is not speaking abstractly. He is naming a show, naming a network. He says the remarks were really sick. He says broadcasters that air the show risk their license. He says, in the exact phrase that will be quoted in every legal brief filed in the weeks that follow, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, the easy way or the hard way," spoken by the chairman of a federal regulatory agency about a comedian on the night of the broadcast. Nexstar, which owns 32 ABC affiliates and has a $6 billion acquisition pending before the FCC, pulls Kimmel's show within hours of Carr's statement. Sinclair pulls it. ABC announces an indefinite suspension. Carr posts, "I hope other broadcasters follow Nexstar's lead." Trump posts, "Great news for America." Then, Jimmy Kimmel is canceled. Then, congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. He posts this before the suspension has been formally confirmed. He knows before the announcement. He knows because the architecture of this outcome was built by people who kept him informed of its construction. 6 days, then the deal, then the stage, then 7 words. The night of Kimmel's return, Studio 6A holds a specific kind of energy that a floor director who has worked the building for 11 years later describes as nothing he has experienced in 11 years of working the building. Not excitement, not celebration. The compressed, breath-held stillness of a room that understands it is witnessing something that will not repeat. That this specific convergence of this man, this stage, this moment, this camera, exists once and then becomes history. Kimmel walks out. The audience finds the register that is louder than ordinary applause and holds it there, sustained, for longer than applause usually holds. He walks through it to the desk. He sits. He picks up the printed page. Trump's post, the one that celebrated the cancellation before the cancellation was confirmed, and reads it aloud, once, without comment, then sets it face down. He shows the clip of Trump on Air Force One. The president, in the footage, is relaxed. He is describing Kimmel's ratings in the specific tone of a man discussing evidence of his own vindication. He says Kimmel has no ratings. He says the suspension proves what he has always known. He says it with the ease of a man who has been waiting to say it and now has the permission that a federal regulator gave him on a podcast. The clip ends. Kimmel looks at the camera. "Well, I do tonight." Then he puts comedy down. "This show is not what matters," he says, his voice settling into the register he has used in the weeks since the cancellation announcement. Not performance, not craft. The register of a man who has decided honesty is the only tool left worth using. What matters is that we live in a nation that permits us to have a show like this. He pauses. The room is completely still. A governmental threat to silence a comedian disliked by the president is anti-American. That is anti-American. He says it twice. Not for rhythm, not for effect. Because he needs the sentence to exist in the room at full weight before he continues. And full weight requires saying it twice. He tried to cancel me, he says. Instead, he compelled millions to tune in. That backfired tremendously. Then a door near the stage right curtain opens. A constitutional law professor who helped draft the ACLU's formal brief challenging the FCC's action walks to a microphone near the desk. She does not speak as a partisan. She speaks as a person who spent 30 years studying the precise legal architecture that protects the press from the government, who watched that architecture tested in September 2025 in a way it has never been tested before, and who needs the record to contain the specific legal name for what Brendan Carr did on a podcast on the night of September 17th. What Chairman Carr did, she says, is called jawboning. It is the use of governmental authority, not formal legal action, but the credible threat of formal legal action, to coerce a private actor into suppressing speech the government disfavors. The Supreme Court addressed this doctrine in 2024. The standard is clear. A government official who uses the threat of regulatory harm to pressure a private company into silencing a speaker has violated the First Amendment. What Carr said, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," is not ambiguous. It is jawboning. It is unconstitutional, and it worked. She lets the last sentence sit. It worked. The acknowledgement that the law was violated and the violation was effective, that the architecture of pressure functioned exactly as designed, lands in the room the way a fact lands when it contains something unbearable inside it. A second figure steps out. He is a former Nexstar regulatory affairs executive. He was in the room when the decision to pull Kimmel's show was made on September 17th. Not the public decision, the internal one, which preceded the public one by 40 minutes. He stayed in his role for 3 weeks after the suspension. He left because he attended a meeting where the decision was discussed, after the fact, in terms that made clear the calculation had nothing to do with Kimmel's remarks and everything to do with the $6 billion acquisition that required Brendan Carr's goodwill to proceed. His voice, when he speaks, is entirely flat. The flatness of someone who has drained all the emotion out of the sentences because the sentences themselves are damaging enough without it. The phrase used in the meeting, he says, was regulatory relationship, as in, pulling the show was an investment in the regulatory relationship, not a moral decision, not a standards decision, an investment. He looks at the desk, not the audience. I want to say something else. Carr's statement came at 9:47 p.m. Our decision was logged internally at 10:23 p.m. 36 minutes. That is how long it took a federal regulator's words on a podcast to produce a programming decision at one of the largest broadcast companies in America. I want that number in the record. 36 minutes. That is what easy way or hard way means in practice. The room processes 36 minutes. Individually, a man in the third row tilts his head back and stares at the ceiling. A woman near the stage presses 2 fingers against her lips. A camera operator keeps her lens on Kimmel's face and does not pull back. One person stands. Center section, a woman, maybe 60, hands coming together slowly, the way hands come together when there is nothing else left to do with the weight of what has been said. Then the row around her, then the section behind. The theater fills with the specific, deliberate applause of people who are not responding to a cue, but making a decision. The decision to stand in a room with cameras at a moment that is going to exist on a recording long after the evening is over. Kimmel does not stand. He sits with both hands flat on the desk and lets it build and hold and slowly resolve. When the room is quiet again, he looks at the camera. The architecture of this, he says, is not complicated. The FCC chair said 4 words on a podcast. The network complied in 36 minutes. The president posted before it was confirmed. And then, 6 days later, I came back. Because that's the one thing the architecture didn't account for. His voice does not rise. It was built to produce silence. It produced this instead. He turns the printed page over, reads Trump's post one more time, sets it down. He said I had no ratings. He was wrong. And the only reason that matters is this. He is always wrong about the things he celebrates too early. Always. And the things he celebrates too early are always still standing when the celebration ends. By midnight, the clip is already moving. Not the 7 words, though the 7 words travel fastest. The clip that spreads through the early hours is the 36-minute figure, stated flatly by a man who was in the room, placed inside the sentence that gives it its weight. That is what easy way or hard way means in practice. It spreads without caption. It spreads as its own argument. It reaches 8 million views by the following evening across platforms the FCC cannot regulate, cannot threaten, and cannot reach. Trump posts at 7:31 a.m. 5 paragraphs. Capital letters in the second sentence. Failing show. Total disaster. Witch hunt. Lowest ratings in history. Each paragraph screenshotted and placed beside the specific clip it denies. The split screen assembles itself. On one side, a professor naming jawboning, an executive naming 36 minutes, and a man saying 4 words that the president needed to be false and were not. On the other side, 5 paragraphs of volume with no document, no date, no witness. The ACLU brief enters the federal court record. The WGA and SAG-AFTRA issue joint statements. 3 senators request a formal congressional inquiry into Carr's conduct. 2 constitutional law journals announce special issues on the case. The show continues. Kimmel continues. The FCC still has the power it used on September 17th, but now it has used it in public, in front of everyone, and the public has seen exactly how fast it works and exactly what it costs. 36 minutes. That is the number nobody who watched this broadcast will forget. Not the jokes, not even the 7 words. The 36 minutes between a threat on a podcast and a programming decision at a corporation that needed the threatener's goodwill. The architecture of it, visible now to anyone who wants to look. After everything you just saw, ask yourself one thing. What else has been hiding behind the noise? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story isn't over. It's just getting started.